Welcome to Common Man Cocktails. I'm your host, Derrick Schommer. This is part 3 of a 3 ice cube series. We did just the ice blocks. We've done the perfect cubes from Tavolo. The last set I want to do is the Tavolo sphere, and I'm going to throw in the colossal cube just because I have them. These are all available at awesomedrinks.com if you want to purchase them from us. The goal here is to see if I can create clear ice and do it in a shape of a sphere. Now, I did a test. The test I will end up having, which is baking, freezing, is utilizing the same thing, but with a mint leaf inside of it, which I think is kind of cool. But let me just fill this up and I'll explain. Alright, I have both of these full of water to the little fill line that exists on them. I think this one might be a little bit over, so it'll just be a little messy, whatever. What you could do at this stage after you filled this thing up is throw in a mint leaf, throw in a flower or something to garnish the drink. If you're making mojitos and you want to use clear ice, throwing mint leaves is kind of cool. So I have one freezing right now that has a mint leaf in it, and that's the one I'll use for the second part of this to speed it up. This, however, is easy to cap, right? You take this little cap, and it's going to push the volume out a little bit, and there's a hole in the top, so you'll see it kind of pop. The water will, well, I guess I could put it over here, but anyway. The water has a place to release a little bit. Same with this one, right here on the top. There you go. So what that's doing is that's giving the ice a place to grow. It needs some space to grow. This one could probably use a little additional water in it. Let's see. There you go. A little bit of water pops out, which is good. So what you're going to do now is you're going to need to build your ice hammock, like you'll see in the video at the end of this, where we created the perfect cubes. And to do that, I'm going to drape this over. I'm going to use a chip clip on one side, boom, lock it in. Then I'm going to sink this into the water a little bit and lock that in over there. And then I'll put the other clip on once I've got this in the right level. Now, the trick is you can't freeze these this way, like you would typically do if you're doing this in the refrigerator. Each Tavolo comes with a stack of 2. You can put them on top of each other and put them in the refrigerator or in the freezer. And the reason is, since the ice is going to grow, it's going to pop a little bit out and release from that hole and then freeze, and it's good. The problem with doing that here is the top-down freezing technique, where you're going to take everything and have it freeze down and push the whatever the bubbles, the air bubbles, the different sediments and anything that you can find inside of all the elements that come inside of water, especially tap water, can be pushed out through that hole. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put our finger over it, we're going to flip it upside down and put it into the water. And since it's going into the water, no air is going to get in, so it's not going to, a little water on the top, it's not going to all drain out because it's going to be sitting in a bath of water. So you take it, put your finger in there, flip it upside down, it lands in your water bath, and it sits. Right, one's resting. You're going to do the same thing with your second one. Put your finger on it, flip it upside down. In this case, I can see there's a little air pocket, so what I'm going to do is fill it a little bit more. There, now I got rid of the air pocket, so there's no air in there. And then I'm going to flip it under the water, let it go in, and it sits. Now these guys are resting in the water, and the top-down technique can start to work. One of the issues you may encounter, and this may decide how deep you put it in the water, is if it's too high, that water at the top freezes so quickly that it doesn't have a chance to push down because it's still near the surface. So if the little nipple that has a hole in it freezes solid, none of the components that are stuck in that thing are going to be able to escape. If they can't escape through that hole and they freeze up, then you end up with a white block. So there's a little bit of what I'd want to say is science versus your tolerance for chopping. In this case, by leaving it floating above, they're going to freeze a little quicker, the bottom's going to freeze a little slower. The goal is to make sure that the top freezes at a slow enough pace that it can push that out. However, if I put these deeper into the water, things are probably going to be okay and work better if you let it sit longer in the freezer. However, you're going to do more chopping because it's going to be deeper in the block. So you got to find your perfect balance of how deep you want to be chopping in this ice versus how high and shallow above that you can get so that you can chop easier but still get to maintain a clear piece of ice. So the colossal one's a little bit harder to deal with. It has more volume to it. The little guy sits a little deeper in the water. He's already halfway in, so he has more of an opportunity to freeze directionally without freezing the bottom first. So let's put that in the freezer or pull it out, show you guys what it looks like. And we're gonna do that in rapid form right now. All right, let's see how our ice turned out. What I have is I've got my frozen ice. I've let it sit for almost 15 minutes. Because it's the way we're gonna be taking these large objects out of the ice, I wanted to make sure that I could get the ice out efficiently and see how it goes. I'm gonna use my same ice bowl to catch this stuff. I should be able to flip this upside down. At this point, hopefully everything comes out. That would be nice. So let's do that. Oh, sweet mercy. Yes. Plus, it's pre-leaking on its own. Hot dang. It's got some bubbles floating in here. We get some nice looking clear ice though. Curious to see how much of this is not frozen. Hopefully there's enough water left in here, but not enough to have not frozen the sphere completely. So now let's chop away at this, similar to what we did in the other videos, but it's a lot lighter because it's not as solid because there's a lot more matter in the way of the freeze, so it probably has a longer freeze duration when you do it this way. Now the goal is to get these out and see if our freeze went right down or if we're going to end up with an imperfect cube here. So we'll start with this one, since this one's coming off from the top. We'll put that over here. Try the circle one next. There we go. Got our second one out. This mess you can let thaw for a little bit. Stick it back in my watery mess. So the challenge with this one is just getting out some of the major pieces so that you can break out and get your ice out. Luckily, ice isn't very disruptive from a mess category. It cleans itself up if you let it sit long enough. If you put the brick in your sink, I'm gonna speed it up, chop a little bit more than I have to so I can get the video done for you guys. But overall, just give it some patience and let it settle, maybe 30 minutes to get these guys out. Now you still might have to wait a little while on these ones because they're in here. But let's see. Oh, that one came out. This should be the test here. This one, the ice brick didn't come out as planned, and I believe it's just because the hole was, it froze before you can get all the air down in it. This one did a much better job. There are a few bubbles on the top, and those will go away with time. So overall, as a test experiment, I think the square is going to be most challenging because the hole within the sphere itself isn't very large. So you end up having a harder time getting the air to push out, and it's freezing too quickly. One method you might be able to use to get around that is to submerge it deeper into the water so instead of being floating above it, float it under it. Where the sphere is a little bit easier, apparently. And what I did with the sphere here is I embedded in it a mint leaf. So if you kind of just look and put that into your glass, since even some of the bubbles that are reflecting are going to dissipate within the water, you're still going to end up with a perfectly clear sphere, but you can embed product in there, like mint leaves for your mojitos, or basil, or a flower if you wanted to put a flower in there. Just throw the flower in, let it settle, put the top on, freeze it up, and you end up with a sphere of glass that has products like mint, garnishes built right in. So your garnish becomes part of the final product. I think that's kind of neat. The colossal cubes, probably going to be a little bit more work. I don't know if it necessarily matters that they be completely clear. Using this method, you could use the original method that we have, which I'll put at the end of this video or in the links below. Actually, the video at the end will be how to create perfect cube ice. The video at the end of that one is how to create ice blocks. That makes a more clear ice. However, it won't be as perfectly square. So for this, I say embed it completely in the water. For this one, you can float it above it, you know, at about this high, and it should freeze pretty well. And you'll notice, even just sitting here, that the bubbles start to fall away from our little glass sphere. Glass being liquid. That's it, folks. That is how I suggest you create clear ice using a Tavolo sphere and a Tavolo colossal cube. Now go to work, create your clear ice. We're teaching you how to make ice. And then you've got yourself the trays, the tray results. Personally, there are a couple scores in here, like a little bit of stress from the ice because it's still going to be pushing up against the tray.